Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. You are about to join a frequency that will open your mind, expand your heart, and activate your spirit. Thank you for joining Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby Medium and Master Energy Therapist. Kelly believes in the power of the Spirit Baby. She speaks with babies in spirit before life, in the womb, and after life. She supports, teaches, and guides others to tune into the intuitive and mystical parts of life for greater wisdom. Join her in meeting your soul baby and build your connection and relationship with deep love and trust. Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio with your host, Spirit Baby Medium, Kelly.
Welcome to episode 107, February 19th, 2021, An Apprenticeship with Grief and the Rituals of Life After Infancy Loss. Are you aware of how to build spiritual and sacredness into your life after loss? How do you allow grieving to hold you and heal you? What healing and supportive rituals and ceremonies can give to your heart? How do you honor your baby and yourself? I have a special guest episode, and I always get very excited by that. Hi, Kelly. Her name's Kelly. I'm not talking to myself.
Hello, Kelly.
And so just to make sure, because I do episodes where it's just me, and I have to say I'm going to introduce more about Kelly and who she is and what we're going to get into. But also, I always like to, how do I meet people? How does this work? And I jokingly, I'm laughing now because I'm like, I'm spying on you on Instagram and her beautiful work and these images. And as I say, and as those that tune in and know, it's not just words people sharing, it's a vibration. There's something in that. And of course I'm reaching out and going, will you be on my podcast? And yes, we're here. It's so awesome. And we're going to go deep into this energy of ceremony, ritual, grief, and then infancy loss even more. And so I'm going to introduce Kelly. Kelly Hurley is a certified life cycle funeral celebrant, serving families as a ceremony and ritual guide. For those special goodbyes that are needed when experiencing pregnancy or infant loss, she accompanies parents providing after-death ceremony and ritual guidance in a hospital, funeral home, or home setting, remembrance, rituals, funerals, and memorials. Kelly became a celebrant after a career of counseling people undergoing loss, trauma, and mental health challenges. Her soul's purpose is a ceremonialist of a new age and keeper of the sacred for all who love, grieve, and transition. And for all those who don't have a voice, she has completed certifications as an end-of-life doula, home funeral, ritual, and ceremony guide, grief and loss group facilitator, and holding space for pregnancy and infant loss. She enjoys gardening, creating mandalas with nature's gifts, and spending time with her husband and pets bring her solace. Kelly's energy practices include Reiki, integrative energy therapy, I'm saying that right, acupuncture, and working with crystals. Hello, Kelly.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello.
How did I say that? Did I say that right? Thank you.
You almost did. It's
Sorry.
it's auricular acupuncture.
What is that?
That is acupuncture focused on the ear. So that's
wow.
The ear actually contains all the body's meridian and energy systems right into the ear. So every organ, emotions, etc., are actually all found in the ear. And so it is a practice for helping people with detoxification and stress. And I did that at my previous work with people who were going through addiction and withdrawal.
Love it. I love acupuncture, but that's really cool. I've learned something new today. I just had no idea, but I'd love to hear more about who you are, what you do, and more than anything, what does it mean, life cycle celebrant? What is that?
Okay. So a celebrant is someone who has the honor of serving families and individuals, helping to create ceremony and ritual that would mark significant life events. So from everything from birth to death and everything in between. So there are celebrants for naming ceremonies and retirements. So those life passages that we all go through. And I studied at the Celebrant Foundation and Institute to specifically be a funeral celebrant. So my role in serving families is to provide end-of-life ceremony and rituals. So in my practice, one part of my role is to co-create and officiate end-of-life ceremonies with families. And those ceremonies would be just general funerals and memorials, living funerals, pre-planning funerals, etc. And the other part of my practice is working with families who have experienced pregnancy and infancy loss. So my role as a life cycle funeral celebrant in that respect when working with families is not only to co-create funerals and memorials for parents, but also to serve families, helping them create rituals for miscarriage or medically terminated pregnancies, and after death ritual, which can take place at a hospital or a funeral home or the family's residence. So as a life cycle celebrant, my work really requires me to wear many hats when I work with families. So I'm connecting with them emotionally and spiritually and personally. I'm creating ceremony and ritual. I'm being a wordsmith. I'm officiating. I'm bringing community together, to recognize loss collectively. So that might be through having a community event to, in October to recognize pregnancy loss month and all the recognition and that goes into that, and then doing that all by holding space for all the chaos and just absolute disorder of a baby's death. So that is what I do. And
so yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, certainly working with ceremony and grief rituals, just maybe we can take a second to just kind of define those things because they're kind of abstract and what do they look like might be helpful because a lot of people might think of my service as just doing funerals and memorials for people who have lost their children, but it's really so much more than that. So I'd love to share with you and everybody listening, about the sacredness of ceremony and grief rituals. And of course, we're obviously talking around grief and death specifically.
Yeah, I would love this interesting, this life cycle, celebrant. I love the word that says life in there because it's so easy to go into this making it everything's about death because a lot of the work you do is kind of between both worlds, right? And so yes. It seems just very encouraging. Oh, but I can really feel the expansiveness of what you're sharing. It's not just, and I'm glad that you said that. It's not that just is a bad thing, but it's it's not just about funeral memorial because that's where we go, I feel collectively in our thought space when it comes to that. And I do have, that is one of my questions next, is to definitely talk about even what's the difference between a ritual and a ceremony. Even let's get really basic on that level. And then what are the things maybe that you can share that you have experienced in that space and how you've brought that. And I have to say that a lot of women and couples that do tune in to Spirit Baby Radio, I have seen many of people with infancy loss, a very different experience, even like you said, medical termination, non-medical termination. I've seen a lot of stillbirths and infancy loss even after life or even months, sometimes years after life, are really kind of, I would love to hear even that, how are you continuing even the I don't know if it's the word is honoring, memorializing, or just connecting, because how I do it, of course, is different. I'm just talk to your child, create that relationship, and, see what it brings. But I love ritual and ceremony. I did not grow up that way. A little bit, but there wasn't, the way I bring ritual in, I create a whole altar and, crystals and nature, and of course I share them on Instagram all the time. But I think the rituals I grew up in were more Italian, but they were just smaller, probably more superstitious, to be honest. But now I feel like there's so much an opportunity when you allow yourself, right, to learn about ritual or ceremony, like what does that really mean, and then how do people begin to do that? Like, what would that look like?
Yes, absolutely. So let's touch on what ceremony and grief rituals are. One of my teachers, her name is Sarah Kerr, and she has a practice called Soul Passages in Alberta, Canada. Mm-hmm. And I just resonate so much with her deep, soul-based definitions of ceremony and grief rituals. So my sharing for the definition of those things is certainly going to be spurred by her words. Mm-hmm. So if we start with a ceremony, we can kind of picture in our minds a ceremony being most likely a larger gathering, but the root and the purpose and the intention of that ceremony needs to have some components. So what end-of-life ceremony does is it needs to acknowledge the hardships that have been incurred by death. So in a ceremony that I would write, we're really acknowledging that death and grief of the family in a collective space. I also need to provide information in the words that I share about how to face the challenges of losing someone, and inspire somehow that the family is able to find, a deeper meaning in what has happened, and also the possibility of healing when they're ready at some point. And a ceremony, when written properly, also brings in things like the integration of symbols. So using symbolism of release or shifting something, or certainly with relationship to spirit baby, relationship or continuation, and allowing us to move into the sacred. So if you're designing a ceremony for loss and death, they become very effective because they access our unconscious. And they do that through the words and the symbolism and the ritual actions. And they really speak to the deepest levels of our soul. So it's not just this pantomime going on, with things. When you watch a funeral as an observer, closing the casket, things all happen with symbol and with reason in a ceremony for end of life. And then when we look at grief rituals, those can be intimate. I would say most people do rituals. You can do them by yourself or with a smaller group of people. They might be publicly attended, but generally they're more intimate. And those are purpose to bring unity and connection into our lives, and really help us seek a higher purpose and try to find deep meaning. So it connects us to the healing wisdom that's within us all, and that is really important to me when I work with families, is to instill that we innately have the power through our soul, with the help of spirit and ancestors, and just our body knows how to physically and emotionally heal if we allow that. And ritual is a wonderful catalyst to support us doing that. And when we look at ritual, it's not to remove a painful past, or remove the pain from losing a child, which is never good. That only serves to, reinforce denial or other avoidance behaviors. But we're looking to develop a different relationship to the circumstances that have presented in our lives, that being the death of a child, and just try to instill the confidence that we can bring together with help and time and healing. We can bring together the past and use it to give new meaning to the future. And I really love, I have this on my wall, and I really love this visual definition of ceremony and ritual being a safe harbor. So a safe harbor to pull into and embrace the depths of our loss. So I always picture, we've just lost somebody. We're in this little boat in the middle of the ocean. We're helpless. We're scared. It's dark. We're feeling swallowed up by all this space, and we just don't know what to do. And, I picture this harbor where we can just come in for a little while. And if it's a harbor, you picture your boat, you don't stay there forever, but you come in for a little while, and you pull in, and your ritual and ceremony provide you with safety and a container for your grief that you can embrace the depths of your loss. So when I work specifically with ceremony and ritual for pregnancy and infancy loss, there are some specific goals that I want to incorporate in ceremony and ritual, and those are practices that they seek to create and celebrate a soul bond with the baby and honor the parent-child relationship. So
let me pause you there for a second. I want to pause you for a second on that, because I don't want to miss all this other good stuff you were just talking about. And then I do want to hear that. That feels really powerful. I love that word, soul bond. But even to some of the things going back, the hardship of death, like really just taking that in, and then how you bring in that inspiration for the person to find that depth of meaning. And I know that's the biggest one I hear a lot, is like, where's the meaning behind it? Of course, it's not meaningless, and our lives are purposeful, and we may not have every single answer, and especially death can be very mysterious. And I like how you said the possibility of healing. It feels so like, it's not like, oh, well, you're going to heal and this is how it's going to be, because it's very in the moment, it's very individual. Like, what does one's own possibility really look like may not look like someone else's. And I absolutely love what you said at this one point, too, is the relationship continuation. I was like, oh, I like the way that goes together. The relationship continuation, and what does that look like with the child, with baby, obviously with child, and how does that continue to bring, a level and depth of healing, of course, to then go, where is that next kind of self-awareness, or what is your purpose even in the world, or how do you continue to function, right? How do you continue to thrive and continue to be a part? And I know there are different levels of that. I'm sure you've seen that. Whereas obviously with the initial shock and trauma, right, our nervous systems are, we're like in these certain places, and then it changes. And I always tell people it's not time that heals. It's really awareness, commitment, connection, heart, like that really allows it. Because time makes it feel like, okay, I'm just going to sit back here and 5 years from now I'll be totally okay, right? But it's never like that. With any death, especially, I shouldn't even say especially child death. I feel like with any death, and it depends on your relationship with that person in the death experience and the life experience, whether it's a little like experience or a long term, it's like that. I always feel like it's an ongoing connection of like, okay, like there's no closure. I almost feel like, you know what I mean? Like people, let's say closure on the level of like, okay, yeah, your child is gone, they're dead. but what does that mean now? Like you're always going to feel that connection, right? It's like that's the piece. And we'll talk about that later. I do want to talk a little bit about grief. But I really love, these things I was writing when you were saying that, just to kind of reiterate it, bring it back to the energy. But this soul bonding, and that was my other question, is like, let's say I know people are tuning in going, whether it's just a more recent, I do get a lot of inquiries about recent loss and, the shock and trauma around it, like, what do I do? Where's my baby? Why didn't they come? This is what they ask me, right? And there's no like cookie cutter definitive answers around that. And I actually don't do mediumship work in that way anymore. I feel like there's other people that can serve that well. I do more of I call it like a grief mentoring, which offers somatic mediumship work in the sense there, I can hear your children, but what is that going to do for you, to be honest? I feel like, how do you continue to build your connection in that realm and in your life to then, be aware of what can serve you in that relationship, or what is next, what is, happening. And so I'd love to hear what is it different for someone, even in a ritualistic space in the beginning, where they just barely can get out of bed and just doesn't even know how to function, as opposed to somewhere, with some deeper therapy and self-work. And, what is that? What can you say about that? Would the ritual be different?
Yes, it would be. And I think when we think, I want to jump off some of the things you were saying too,
mm-hmm.
is, we can, with ritual and ceremony, we use a lot of words about shifting and changing and healing. And ritual, participating in ritual and ceremony with a child's death, it's not a catalyst for instant healing and fixing. It's just not, because it doesn't even resonate at that level. So if we're doing soul-based ceremony and ritual, it's resonating at a sacred soul level. So those changes, and there are changes, and people, don't get me wrong, there are people who have attended a ceremony or participated in a ritual who have had, just incredible movement. But that's not generally what happens. It's that I have a mantra, and it's gentle our way in, gentle our way in. And that's, to me, what ritual and ceremony does. It's a gentle feeding of the soul and supportive movement. So when we talk about, when I'm using words, about movement and change and going through that grief journey, it's just those small little movements. There is no healing and there's no fixing, because there's nothing that needs to be fixed. It's, grief and death, those are human experiences, and there is nothing that needs to be fixed at that time. So when we look at the ceremony and ritual for parents, again, that goal is really looking at creating that recognition of a family, and that baby is part of your family and always will be. So it's taking time through ritual and ceremony to create memories and just acknowledge your baby's existence in the world, and that really helps parents cope with that grief later. And maybe it would be helpful if I just shared an example of a ritual that I would do. This is, and then we can kind of break it down and show you on a soul level how deep we can go and how impactful and with that connection. So if I'm called to the hospital, let's say that there's mother has delivered quite early on in her pregnancy, and the baby has passed. I can be called from the hospital to come in and do after death care support. So one of the rituals, and this ritual, the amazing thing about this ritual is it literally probably takes about 1 minute and 30 seconds, but it's so moving. And one of the things I can offer the family in the hours after that baby's death is an anointing ritual. So what anointing is basically, it means to honor and introduce a divine connection. So we've heard anointing generally in respects to religious, anointing of the feet, etc. But we can anoint. Anointing has much deeper meaning just than a religious context. So the ritual, one of the rituals, we can anoint in actually quite a few different ways, but one of the ways we can do that is to anoint a meridian point. So a meridian is a channel of energy. So we can anoint that channel of energy on the baby's feet with essential oil. And I usually like to use a higher vibrational oil such as like frankincense or rose. And this specific meridian point is called the Wellspring of Life. So it's a kidney meridian, and it's said to contain the life force of beginnings. So this specific point that you would be anointing is about connecting to and blessing the new journey of this child. So if we kind of use our mind's eye and picture this tiny, tiny little baby wrapped up in a blanket in the bassinet, and she's got flowers around her, and the parents are there, and they take a little bit each of oil and put it on their fingers, and then they gently touch or anoint that point on the little one's feet. And while they're doing that, I say, may the air carry your spirit gently. May the fire release your soul. May the water cleanse you. May the earth receive you. May the wheel turn again and bring you to rebirth. And that's the ritual. Wow. And so if we break that down into the actual powerfulness of all the components of this ritual, it's stimulating the senses. So first of all, we have that sense of smell of the oil and the touch of that child and the sounds of the words that I'm speaking. And then we have that sixth sense introduced. So the ethereal sense of the essential oils vibration. I always try and collectively breathe with the family while they're doing rituals. And then we have that soul connection with that baby, because we're specifically choosing that point of life force in that meridian. And then there's the ritual acknowledgement of spirit and new beginnings and release and rebirth. And all those things are happening in that just short little ritual. And, although these ritual elements, in the midst of this grief and shock and trauma from just losing a child, hours before, obviously the family is not necessarily going to, recognize all those components. But the reality is that, in fact, those things are being ingested by the psyche and the subconscious. And by doing ritual, it allows you to feel that in your body, and that connection to that child's soul does help with healing. And then we just think of just participating in ritual and what is it breeding in that healing journey for the family. And, it's just that deep soul connection, and it allows for future recollection of that. We had that time with that little one, and we did this, simple, beautiful ritual. They have a memory of that. They might dream about the child, because it added, those rituals in the horribleness of death. It adds a little bit of reverence and beauty. And when we connect to our loved ones in death, whether it's a baby or an adult, that allows us to have those connections of visions and sensations and that soul baby connection with them. And I think it helps with the grief journey that parents aren't searching for something that is lost. They've had that in physical connection with their babies before they had to let them go to the funeral home. And my hope is that through ritual work, bereaved families can somehow process meaning making around the death of their child, and that is it. Unfortunately, just has to be part of that grief journey.
So this is yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I feel like, 'cause now I'm like, I feel so relaxed by your voice. Ritual is so experiential, and I felt like when you took us into, I thought that gentle our way in. It had to let that settle in to my gentle. Oh yeah. And then I love just the resonating at a soul level. I mean, I feel like, isn't that what most, I want to say, maybe I shouldn't say they should, but I want to say should be about. But I understand that we are human beings having this experience that it feels. But even that, like you're talking about the way the system is, the feeling, the sensing, the kind of auditory kinesthetic connection in that. But I felt like when you were, maybe others will feel it too, I'm sure they will, when you're just taking us through these anointing words, mantras, prayers, intentional energies there, it just feels, it feels so inwardly supportive. And even though maybe in the moment they don't have to make a whole big thing in that moment, what does this need to mean or what does it look like? But that, and then how you talk about the existence of baby being, I would say, is to acknowledge in the world. And I just feel like you affirm my work and bringing that connection with baby in these different ways. And I do see women that are so involved with bringing their child into the world in such a beautiful, healthy way and meaningful way. I see that their sense of psychic awareness and their understanding to where their body is feels more healthy, to be honest. Feels like there's a sense of wholeness. Even though, yes, it's not like they're just visiting once in a while. They're really engaged with, as you said, the continuing relationship, and doing other things of honoring as a family, because sometimes it's a family event. It's not just one or the other. Yes. And then there's other children at times. And so I see that, and I really feel like that is so, I know we're kind of neighbors in our countries, but I know in my country I will speak for, I can't speak for all the other people that are all around the world, but there's not such a strong awareness in death and grief, in the sense that when babies die, which happens quite often, the numbers are quite high globally, but even, let's say more locally, that babies do die. And what do parents then do after that? That's the piece that it feels like tragedy, grief, and horror, really. But it's but when there's this soul level awareness, this intermixing of all things from psychology to spirituality, I see something different. And you could, if you told me 5 years ago even, this is what that's like, I'd be like, I don't know. But now I've been in it, and went through my own initiation of death, which a lot of people know, and I'll share it with you. It was my big energy to move into death midwifery. It had to do with my mom passed away kind of tragically, but fire, a whole messy story. And it wasn't well, to begin with, but it was, and then a few weeks later, my older brother dies. And so then I'm going, what do I do with all this death? It was so overwhelming to me. because I'm going, wait, I didn't finish grieving from my, whatever that is. I was still in the middle of her energy, my mother. It's a big deal. And then I literally had to stop her memorial to then take care of my brother and his wife. And that's, that whole thing. And I, at the same time, I had a 6-month-old. And I'm like, I don't know how to do all this. I was like, still, 6 months, you're still kind of postpartum. I'm nursing a lot still. And I'm going, how do I do all this? Like, I just, and then it really propelled me into deeper levels of my own grief, and then got me into Dead Midwifery. Always wanted to do that work, but it never was quite right. And I guess now it was right. And so then I know that, like, but the ongoing, relationship, the connection, like what is always being offered that feels like it's healing. And I know with a lot of these moms that are in my groups and that I'm connecting with every month, and people that are reaching out, they just want to know that there's something more with their babies. There's like, how, and I love that you shared that ritual, which is so helpful. And I know that the rituals and ceremonies are probably just continuing and always changing for people, right? I mean, because it's like, let's say you come to the anniversary, or I call it the death anniversary, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there's certain words for that. Maybe you have words for that. I don't know. That's what I call it. I'm like, God, because sometimes the birthday is the death day, but also not to be shy. We don't want to pretend that there's not a dead baby or that there's death, right? I mean, that's a big thing.
Yes.
But, there's always words, right? It's always whatever the words are. People have a lot of opinions about words, especially nowadays.
They do, yes. Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
my goodness. You say one wrong thing, and it takes you to, like, something you never even said.
Yeah, well, and my belief, and through my previous work is that words for some people are catalysts for trauma. They elicit this, reaction, and it triggers something where, someone else would be, I don't even know what I said to you, and I'm so sorry, but it's the power and the resonance in words. I guess when we look at kind of the different aspects of pregnancy and infancy loss, we can really use ritual and ceremony to attend to any of those things at any time that they happen. So my services start with after death ritual and ceremony guidance. So those are one of the things that I can offer. So in that role, I would be educating and empowering families, and kind of coming back to the notion of taking care of our own when they die, is to be there and support families to take care of their baby, stillbirth or loss in miscarriage, in the hours after birth loss in the hospital, or in the days after death, if the family's wanting to have a ritual or ceremony at the funeral home before a public funeral, or if the family's bringing the baby home for a vigil. Generally, families then would contact me either through the hospital staff. So if they wanted some support and some ceremony and ritual right after the baby passed, it would almost be like calling in a chaplain. So they may call me in to do that, and I'm on call. So if there is the death at 3:00 in the morning, then I'm okay to come in at that time and share space with them, or the funeral home would call me. And in those instances, I mean, people don't talk about the possibility of infant loss before birth generally. That's not where people go. And there's little to no preparation for the possibility of death, because just, new moms and dads, no one wants to go there. So when it happens, you're swimming in this shock and grief and trauma, and the hospital is asking, do you want to spend time with your baby and hold the baby? And I don't know, and I'm scared, and what would we do in that time? And there's just, so many horrible decisions that have to be made. So bringing in just support and a space, that I can come in and bring ceremony and just small rituals, is something that, I hope that I can support families in. And it's going to look very different for each family. Some families I might come in and do a naming ceremony, and I'm there for 20 minutes, and then that's all they need me for, and they want to take that time, intimate time, to be together. And other times, I may be required to be coming in and doing a little more guidance, and I have a ritual kit that I come in with, and I present myself to this very raw, chaotic state that the family is in, and hopefully with the presence of mind and heart to be fully open and ready for whatever they need and whatever needs to unfold, and trying to encourage and share in ritual practices that can give the family just a container for that grief and instill connection. So in my ritual kit, I have everything from storybooks that the parents can read to the baby, because you don't generally, unless you know that the child isn't going to be life viable after birth, no one's bringing in storybooks and things like that to the birth of their child, because they're assuming they're taking the baby home with them. And those hours that you can spend with baby before baby needs to be taken, by the coroner or the funeral home, there's so many just normal baby parent things that you can do to establish connection. So I have little storybooks that the parents can read. If there's bigger kids, I've got art supplies for the siblings, and a children's book on death that the maybe the grandparents want to read to the older siblings, just to kind of help them along with their grief. I've got recorded lullabies, and then there are ritual options for the families if they'd like to anoint the baby. Like I shared, we can have a naming ceremony. If the medical staff give permission, depending on the state of the baby, I have lovely bathing supplies. We can bath the baby, shroud the baby if they prefer to do that. We can have a ritual of release before the child's given to the funeral home. And I don't participate in the bathing or anything. I'm just there to support and guide the family. I can do things like go out and get flowers and flower petals to adorn the child's body, or if they need photos taken. And really instilling that each one of those tasks, whether it's just simply reading a storybook or to the baby or singing, as a family, no matter how simple those things are, that it's done with meaning and intention, and we know that those ritual actions are forming that connection. So that's where I work, just in those hours after the baby's death. And I can also support families who wish to bring the baby home for a home vigil. So that's where the baby would come home with the family, and generally in the time before cremation or burial. So sometimes families would like to have that gift of bringing their baby home with them. And it's just some private, quiet, sacred time, before entering into that collective grieving space. And I love this. I don't know who coined this, but I love this thought of a home vigil being time out of time. So, like you were talking when you lost your mother and your brother and all the chaos of the grief and having your own family and dealing with that and the arrangements that you have to deal with, etc. And just stealing away for a little time out of all that time, those things that we have to attend to when someone dies, whether it's our baby or our mother, is just having that private, quiet, sacred time to connect as a family is so important. So I can guide family members, again, if they'd like to wash the baby or dress the baby or prepare the baby's body. Some people with a home vigil might have extended family coming in for a viewing. You spoke about altars before, and that's a wonderful ritual that I can help families put together. And then if they want a home funeral ceremony, we can also do that. And I know a lot of parents can't imagine visualizing, having a funeral in their home for their child and how traumatic the thought of that. But if it is such a beautiful experience, and if you ever have, the strength to do so, Olivia Barham, what's her last name, Kelly?
I think you're saying it. I always say it wrong.
Yeah.
Say it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Sorry, Olivia.
Yeah. So at Sacred Crossings, if you look on their website, they actually have videos of, generous, open parents who have had home vigils and home funerals for their children, and you can, if you have the wherewithal to do so, you can watch those, and it is just so touching and beautiful. So anytime parents would like to experience that, holding space and helping out, doing that would be, certainly my absolute honor.
So one of the things you shared, I felt like was really, everything you shared was amazing and so valuable, and it really puts things in perspective, like really having the honor and time and space. Like you said, it's not like you're like sugarcoating that there is really deep stuff happening underneath, and it's hard for people to get there. Like, I know with my own experience, I was like, I wish I would have done all these things. I hear this all the time, so I know, I'm like, because it's like where you are in that frame. And like you said, I like that term, the chaos, because that's for me what it felt like, because I have no other siblings that were involved. There were siblings, but nobody was involved, right? So it was like, I'm the one that's like doing everything. And I have this infant, and I'm like, this is like, and I always wish, like, I didn't know a lot about the death community then as I do now, of course. And I'm sure there's a reason for that, right? Because I would have needed you, Kelly. I needed someone like you to fill in the pieces, to be held. Like, and I just, I did rely on some friends and things, and they were very loving and supportive, but it makes me realize, wow, there's a lot more holding that I needed. And I had to, but I do a lot of healing therapies and I do a lot of stuff. I have to like make up for all this, trauma throughout. But also, one thing I felt like was important you said is that when women are in pregnancy, they're not thinking about death, right? I mean, they could be, but we don't maybe not talk about it. And now I am going to reach out to my birth community people and ask in education, do you teach about death, and what does that look like? Because it's like, oh, don't talk about death, don't talk about something going wrong. Is that scary? But I had a home birth with my my son. He's 4 now. And so 4 years ago, and one of the things you made me think about it when you said that, and in the paper, we actually talked about it, and they asked, it was like a midwifery group, and it says if the baby were to die, either a stillbirth or after. What are your feelings about that? And I was like, whoa. I said, I can't answer this in a sentence. This little paper doesn't give me. This is like a big conversation. And they were totally open. We talked about it, but it was interesting to talk about. It was really powerful, I would say. And of course, I feel like when we're in pregnancy, we are scared of those things. We don't want our baby to die, but we also have to know that, that is a possibility, that soul, I know women always come into blaming themselves, of course, and I know that's a part of the process of grief in life, but also going, okay, there's another soul involved. There's another, person. It's not like just this thing. I mean, it's a person, and so maybe not even knowing what their own internal agreement is with the world, with their own higher self, with the spirit, who knows? Some people know, but then going, okay, like there is always possibility for, like you said, it's almost like, I know we've worked so hard to try to normalize death on so many levels, but this is where I feel like the death midwifery kind of vibe comes in, but it's still very like, let's keep it separate or let's not look at it. And so I'm so curious now to wondering what they're speaking nowadays in that space of, recognizing that, because I've done a lot of women lately coming in my direction with home birth deaths, which is a whole other thing. I mean, it literally, because, in a hospital, it's okay to die in a hospital. I mean, this is my terms, I'm saying. This is not like anywhere, out there, but it's like, it's okay to die in a hospital, but it's not okay to die at home or in a home funeral or home birth even. I mean, it really is very strong. I like that. A lot of people don't know that there is such thing as a home funeral even. And so, so it's quite fascinating, the conversation of death around that. Because, for me personally, I'm like, home birth, home funeral, no brainer, done. Like, there's, for me, but I'm like, but there's no, the acknowledgement of that. And so, which, again, brings in a whole other level. But again, I wonder, because mine was through home birth and the midwives were extremely skilled and very conscientious, very, medically based, like very highly, like lots of experience, but also they were very, spiritually aware people, I felt like, and very emotionally centered, which is important to know, like, but they brought that question to me. That makes me curious now.
Yeah, my understanding, just from when I took my holding space for pregnancy and infancy loss, there were some midwives in that course, and they don't do a whole lot in training for the death and all that accompanies that in their midwifery training, and it obviously depends on who the trainer is. Now, there are bereavement midwives, and there are midwives and doulas that have that training, but it's still just like, us as adults doing our end of life planning. No one wants to talk about that, and certainly, you can have absolute understanding for parents who, when presented with, there's a birth plan, and then, there is also an infant loss plan, and, I don't, I can't imagine most parents wanting to go there. And we have this like, well, what if I do that and I jinx or I cause something, or
that's where people go. Yes, like I'm creating it.
Yes, I put that intention out into the world because I filled this thing out. It was like a prophecy, and but then on the other hand, when it happens, that death happens, and it does happen, more than we want to know for families. There's that kind of liminal space in between where, there's just that urgency to bond with this little being in those couple hours that you have with that child, and you're just in shock. So, bringing ceremony and ritual and support into that is just so important. So, that time can be used for connection and healing.
I feel like I could keep talking to you forever, but we're coming up to the end, and I just like really I love everything that you're sharing and saying, because it really feels in such alignment with what I feel like I want others to be connected with, what I want to bring, more from the spiritual, kind of emotional, being with the ritual of grief. But I want you to share ways that people can contact you, maybe for, whatever it is that your offerings are, your website, your email, or even your Instagram, your hand, is it they call it the handle?
I guess handle? So, yeah, sure. Okay, so with Instagram, my handle on Instagram is with Grace, so that's the name of my practice. So with Grace, Celebrant, Kelly Hurley. And my website is www.withgracepregnancyinfantlossceremonies.com. So that's with Grace, pregnancyinfantlossceremonies.com. And there's also my connections to my Pinterest account that has a lot of resources for baby loss and grief on there. And although my physical services for families, attending and helping families, with ritual and ceremony personally is local here in British Columbia, I'm absolutely happy to connect to anybody through my website who would like to consult, whether it's regarding ceremony or ritual creation for miscarriage or a terminated pregnancy for whatever reason, or if they wanted to just speak about how to create after-death rituals for the hospital or the funeral home or anything around home vigiling. I'm absolutely happy to do that. And it's just I love what I do. I understand that I work in a practice where nobody really wants to have to connect with me and use my services, but in saying that, when they do, I'm just so honored that families, take the risk and to reach out to me for support and collective support in that also.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here. You're such an angelic heart. You have so much offering to have, and it feels, I know it's in your sweet little town, but I feel like it's expansive. It goes further. But any final words that you'd like to share as we are coming here to an end?
I think just 2 points. I would encourage, again, we just talked about birth loss plans, and if I know that task is very overwhelming, but just if doulas and midwives and families could just have a conversation and feel okay doing that, I would just encourage people to do that. And also to any family who has had a miscarriage, especially now that we have COVID and people are being released from the hospital quickly and we don't have those supports, is that whether it's last month or 2 decades ago, please know that you have the right to honor your baby and to invite healing from the loss of your child. And you can do that through ritual and ceremony. It can be, it doesn't have to be a big gathering. It can be a very private, intimate ritual to recognize that loss. And if you do feel called to do so, then, there are life cycle celebrants, all over the United States and Canada, and, reach out and they should be able to help you. Or like I said, you're welcome to contact me and we can sit and share space and time and words to recognize that loss through ritual.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for your service and kindness to grieving families. Warm regards to you and everyone listening.
Thank you all for joining episode 107, An Apprenticeship with Grief and Rituals of Life After Infancy Loss. If you like my podcast, please subscribe, leave reviews, and please check out my book, A Journal, A Sacred Communication, a Spirit Baby Journal, which is for conception and pregnancy, and also my newest addition to the Spirit Baby family is Spirit Baby Oracle Cards, Answers from Spirit Baby, and those are supportive in conception, in pregnancy, and even birth loss.
This is Spirit Baby Radio. Thank you for joining Kelly in the energy of awareness, love, healing, and soul communication. Please join the next episode at www.soulbabycommunication.com.